I'm Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery here with Lovecraft Country editors Marta Evry, Bjørn T. Myrholt, and Ian S. First off, was it a unique challenge working on a show like this in particular that encompasses so many different styles and genres from episode to episode? Let's start with Marta.
Where do you start? Yes, I mean, I give you a classic example was the first episode, which if you watch the first 40 minutes of it is, you think you're watching a version of Green Book, very classic, tale of Jim Crow South. And suddenly giant man-eating monsters come out and rip people's heads off. And then it becomes a horror film. Which is a real right turn in terms of tone and content. And so I think, and I'm sure everybody else will chime in on this, but the hardest part about this was really balancing two things. One was the political and the historical and the metaphorical, which was all the horror, which still plugged into the political and the historical. And, a lot of the creatures and a lot of the horror situations was metaphor for very real racism and the very real exploitation of African Americans and African American bodies and everything that went with that. And that was, I think, the real balance. Was to, use something that was genre and really heighten the reality of this country and its history.
And how about you, Bjørn?
As far as like mixing different genres, episode 7, I Am, that kind of like encompasses a lot of different genres within the episode as well. So Hippolyta is kind of traveling to different planets and experiencing like different historical periods of time. And so the challenge there was to kind of like really focusing on the different segments of the episode, like that needed like a special attention as far as like time and kind of world creation, but also having like the overall kind of theme. So you have the overall arc of the episode kind of seems cohesive, and definitely the underlying narratives of the series and the episode sort of is the thread that kind of takes you through all this kind of different worlds and different experiences. So but it was like it's a lot of fun kind of try it out, like different techniques and different kind of art forms, ways of cinema, so that was a lot of fun, kind of like trying out different hats and making it into kind of like a pretty spectacular episode where you experience so many different things, and people is really going through a metaphorical and also kind of psychological transformation and realization. So that was great fun.
And Ian?
I think my first episode was episode 5, Strange Case. And I think by then, with the first 4 episodes, Marta and Bjørn and the others had done the bulk of the heavy lifting, I guess, in terms of kind of acclimatizing the viewer into this world this universe of Lovecraft Country. So I think, part of the joy of working on an anthology is the fact that you have all these different stories. You have one that's kind of like very Indiana Jones. You have one that's just kind of like more pure horror. You have another haunted house kind of thing. And, Strange Case was more like, kind of invasion of the body snatchers in the sense that, you're people assuming different identities in a different color skin. So I think there was a certain degree, of freedom, I think, with each individual episode, kind of creating your own style and own flavor for like, what is the theme of the episode? What are we trying to say with it? And just having the freedom to kind of just explore, editing wise, the direction you wanted to take the narrative, just through shot selection and such.
And since the three of you worked on different episodes, and a lot of them are so different from each other, I'm wondering how much, if any, collaboration is there, or comparing notes in terms of the overall style of the show, or are you working very individually?
I feel like we talk to each other a lot.
Yeah.
We were always watching each other's episodes, and because even though it was an anthology, I mean, it was a singular storyline from start to finish, with characters that had an arc. And so we, to cut an episode, we needed to be informed about what needed to happen before. But there were many times where I would go into either one of their rooms and said, "Would you come look at this and tell me if I'm crazy? Does this work?"
Yeah, I think Marta was really good about, I guess, providing a lot of the connective tissue, I guess, between the episodes, because, like she said, I mean, do these things work? And, it's different from reading it on a paper and then seeing it at the actual film. And I think for each of us, we each wanted to take, I guess, our individual story to a certain direction, but at the same time, we also had to be very, very cognizant of how to fit the overall arc of the story, and just made sure that we weren't going too far completely left field with what we were doing.
And also our rooms we're in a pretty tight space. All our editing rooms were pretty close. It was really easy to kind of like knock on each other's doors. But one thing also is just like have a peek and be curious what's happening in other episodes, and be inspired and kind of, look what the other episodes are shaping up to be. Sort of, it's just inspirational to kind of see the other good work that's going on, and see the potential of the show. I think that was editing can be a very kind of lonesome thing. You kind of sit and stare at computer screens all day, and kind of it's a very you sit in a room alone usually. So to have that kind of little social aspect, I think that's important to kind of have an exchange of ideas and everything. And I feel that like when we've now this last year we've been kind of working remotely, we're kind of just so separated, and we only like interact by Zoom or Sling or also Slack. So I think that kind of like the social aspect and kind of just knocking on doors and having a conversation, a creative conversation. I think that's the thing that I miss the most about like working, and I think that's it adds so much more to the series and the work you do when you kind of have exchange of ideas. So you don't have to kind of come up with everything on your own. You kind of toss out ideas and kind of ask questions and then get some feedback. So I think that's it's an extraordinarily important part of the process.
And what was the collaboration like with Misha Green, the showrunner? Ian, I know that you edited Underground also. I'm not sure if the other two of you have worked with her before this. But what was that kind of collaborative process like?
I think Misha was very hands-on in terms of I guess just on the production side. So we didn't really see her actively, I guess, until production had wrapped and she was inside, the post hallway with us. From that point forward, I mean, she definitely had a creative hand in everything. We to all of our best abilities. I mean, we tried to deliver in terms of like, what we wanted personally, creatively in the cut, and also at the same time trying to reconcile with how she saw the vision of the overall story. I think, again, like going back to what you were asking earlier, and was there a lot of collaboration between the editors? Yes, certainly. But at the same time, I think, Misha adding, coming in and kind of like I guess taking the wheel at that point. I think we all had to be very, very clear on like where we were all, make sure we were all driving in the same direction, to make sure that the whole story came together.
Yeah, I mean, I had a slightly different experience in that I was brought on first to do a recut of the pilot. So they had shot the pilot well, it seems like a long time ago. I think it was in summer 2018. They had gotten it to a certain point. They knew they were going to do reshoots. They knew they were going to do additional scenes. And so they put it away until they came back in 2019 to start principal photography again. And so I was actually brought on by another producer, Dan Sackheim, to meet with Misha and to kind of act as a film doctor. And they wanted somebody to take a fresh look at the first episode and actually without any input from anybody, just do a page one, recut and just see what I would bring to it, which I did. The other editor, Chris, who I had only worked on the pilot, I thought did a really good job, but it just needed focus, and it needed to have some allowances for the material that was about to come in. So I started, working on that before they had even started shooting. And so I ended up working with Misha pretty extensively before she got pulled into Georgia and was working on principal photography. So there was a chunk where it was, we were sort of cheek to jowl on that for a while. And then, as Ian said, once production started, it was it was basically what we did with the cuts, and we didn't have that much input with Misha until she came in. But there were some sequences where it's, again, going back to the pilot, the slow speed chase, for instance, it was one of the things that they reshot things inside the car. From the time I did a recut on that until the time we locked it was 6 months. And that's how long. And it was and we were always playing with it. It wasn't like it just sat there for a while. But in that case, I think that needed to happen because it was such a different idea, because they were being chased out of town by the sheriff, and they were really locked in because they couldn't just speed out of the sundown county. They couldn't speed because they would be pulled over and they would be arrested if they didn't make it. But if they didn't make it out of the sundown county in time, they would be pulled over and hung. So the tension between those two things, where they couldn't speed, but they had to get out of there, and the tension and the looks on people's faces as they went through this was something that took quite a while to, get right. And that sequence took so much longer than any of the genre stuff because it was all internal. But yeah, once Misha came back in, it was, we were going over a lot of things with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that it was setting the tone and saying the things that she wanted the film to say.
And wondering if each of you has a particular sequence or scene from the season that you're most proud of. Marta, you just mentioned that slow speed chase and how much work went into that. How about you, Bjørn?
Yes, a few things. One little curious thing in episode 2, actually, there's a scene where Christina is helping the villagers. There's a cow that gives birth, and the way that ended up in when you see the series is, you see the baby Shogoth being birthed, and that's a kind of a shocking end to that scene. But that scene was actually scripted and shot as if it was just like a normal birth of a calf. So that scene was kind of like a little bit of an oddity in the episode. So everybody was kind of, so what is this scene actually doing here? How can we change it to kind of have a little bit more of a meaningful impact on the episode? And I suggested, I always saw it as this is an opportunity for the villagers to have a little bit of a kind of like an extra story point, and also looping in the shoggoth and the monsters into the scene. So I came up with the idea of like, oh, why would I change the calf to a shoggoth? That sounds far more interesting, and it gives a little bit more depth to the kind of the surrounding areas of the villagers and what they do there, and also to Christina as a character. So everybody liked the idea. So eventually we ended up kind of changing that baby calf to a shoggoth, and it's pretty effective in the episode. Other scenes as well is in episode 7. I am. Towards the end, there's a pretty long segment where Hippolyta is kind of experiencing different time periods, and also the story kind of evolves into the sci-fi, and she becomes an Amazonian warrior and everything. And that sequence, I'm pretty happy with, because that is pretty close to what I initially cut together. So that sequence really feels like a really long journey and a really exciting journey, and the main focus was to give it a certain pace. So all these kind of short little scenes kind of feels cohesive, and you kind of go from one experience at one planet to the other seamlessly, and especially the fight as an Amazonian warrior is pretty spectacular, I think. Just that little duel before she goes to full battle. I used a lot of kind of speed ramps and kind of like trying to manipulate the motions of the characters, because you need a little bit more kind of like athletic behavior in the characters. So that was a pretty intricate, but it's pretty seamless. You don't see it, like all the kind of manipulation that goes on in that scene, as far as like the impact of the battle. So that was quite a bit of work, kind of getting that as exciting as humanly possible. And then when you transition to the full battle, it's just magnificent, as far as like also what the VFX did to that scene, because the edits added so many backgrounds and also extra digital characters into the battle scene. I give a shout out to Kevin Blank and Kevin McAllister, who was the VFX supervisor on the show, and they helped a lot to kind of prep those scenes and kind of make it as spectacular as humanly possible. So it ended up being pretty great.
And what about you, Ian?
I'm going to take mine a little different direction, I think, than Bjorn. I think, one of the more challenging yet rewarding scenes for me was also, again, episode 5, Strange Case, Montrose at the drag ball, where he finally kind of accepts, this hidden side of himself, and then fully embraces his identity. That sequence, I must have cut over. Misha and I collectively cut it over like at least 30 or 40 times, just trying to get it right. And we tried it with the original production music that was in there. It was very, very different, and the vibe was very, very different. We tried playing it a lot more real time, and eventually we just kind of started stepping it out as a montage, and still wasn't quite right. And I told Misha, I think, what would really help this is kind of finding like that right piece of music, that right needle drop to really kind of get inside Montrose's head, and still at the same time, take him on this journey of kind of accepting who he is. And so, Misha, it was late, and Misha's like, what, I'm just going to sleep on it. And, I spent like another hour at work, like digging through music cues, trying to find something that worked, and I finally just kind of gave up. And then the next morning, she she came in and she says, like, I think I have it. She woke up and she just kind of had this epiphany, I guess. And the cue that we dropped in, I was like, okay, I think I can make this work, and tying the music into, I guess, the visual imagery of what he was emotionally going through. I think it played out very, very effectively. And, I'm so happy that we finally found it. It's such a huge relief when you see it play out that way. And, we didn't I mean, there weren't really any visual effects in that sequence at all. You know, I think that speaks to the power of storytelling and I guess collaborative editing. So that's one of the sequences I'm very, very proud of.
Well, I want to congratulate all three of you on all of your work on the show. You know, such wide-ranging, interesting, intricate work. And you know, congratulations again. And thank you guys so much for talking to me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.